So good afternoon. My name is Bill Croyle, Acting Director for the California Department of Water Resources. It's raining. I guess it's a nice cool storm coming in. We'll talk a little bit about that. As usual, I'll start off with talking about our current reservoir operations, emergency response activities. So as of 10 o'clock this morning, the lake elevation was right at 845 feet. Inflow is fluctuating somewhere at 16 to 18,000 CFS inflow. The spillway flow is 0 over the spillway. And the Hyatt release is 10,000. And so I want to make sure that I remind people that the Hyatt powerhouse will increase and decrease, giving a number of different conditions, a lot of its operation and maintenance, on making sure that we keep that plant humming as its most efficient manner. So again, we will adjust the releases from that powerhouse as needed. The tail race is again continuing to drop with the flows that we're managing, about 225.1 feet this morning. And our overall river discharge to the Feather River from the project is 10,400 CFS. To date, we continue to remove material from the diversion pool with our primarily land-based, but there is some water-based removal actions going on. Those that long-reach excavators, they're able, from the land, get down pretty darn deep within that deep channel and continue to remove material. As we've talked about before, we had 1.7 million cubic yards of material to remove from the diversion pool, and to date we have about 1.46 million removed. That is an amazing effort. Going back to a number of weeks ago when we started this, some of our contractors were thinking this was going to be 3 or 4 months, and we've done this in 3 or 4 weeks. And so that goes to them, the coordination with our safety teams, with our project managers, and certainly those contractors that are working together. An awful lot of equipment and material is moving around. Since it is raining, I feel the need to talk more about weather a little bit. We do have a pretty good weather system coming in starting, it was supposed to start tonight, looks like it's already started. It starts out a little bit on the warmer side, but looking at the duration of about a 4-day event, and about 2 to 3 inches of rain in the upper watershed, and it'll get cooler as it goes through the system, with snow levels dropping down to about 3,500 feet. We do have a second system that's now forecast out. It's similar in nature, not quite as strong. We'll have a couple, 3 or 4 days of dry period, and then we'll get back into another wet system coming through. So with regard to the capacity of the reservoir and our current emergency operations, it should have very little effect on our overall reservoir elevations. So we do expect to see between these storms an overall about 5-foot increase in reservoir elevation, even though we're not taking water over the flood control spillway, and so we're maintaining, again, those inflows and outflows through the Hyatt powerhouse. I think our models we're running, the inflows for this current storm coming in might get up as around 39,000 CFS for a little while, then drop back down as the storm goes by down to about 18,000 CFS, and then they'll continue to reduce as we watch the hydrograph comes out and the water comes in. But then again, we'll have a little bit of a bump with the second storm coming in. So again, we've talked a little bit about the second wettest year on record here in the Feather River Basin. So right now we're looking at 197% of average. So it's been a pretty wet year. It's number 2 on the record books at the moment. So as of this morning, we have a little under 84 inches of rain on snow in the watershed. The record is 88.5. And so with the forecast weather coming in, this is up until October 1st. So we have quite a bit of year to go through to break that 88.5 inches in that 8-station index. A lot of that, of course, in the Feather River watershed. And our snowpack right now is running about 140% of average. And so what that means, of course, is we're watching the snow melt very closely, making sure that we're considering that. We run our models based on inflow, reservoir operations, the operation of Hyatt Powerhouse twice a day. And the idea for that is forecasting out what our operations might be and any adjustments that we might need to consider, again, twice a day. And we do that through our incident command team that's here in place and working closely with the Orville Field Division, which is now, some of them are getting back to their normal day jobs, which include operating and maintaining the Hyatt Powerhouse. So from an emergency response standpoint, we're continuing to conduct those things that we've been doing every day around the clock, monitoring all these systems, the emergency spillway, the flood control spillway, the deck, the erosion, the progress on the emergency or the dredge material removal and operation of the Hyatt Powerhouse, the diversion dam down below, and our downstream water conditions down through the Feather River. Again, I want to reiterate the point on the Hyatt Powerhouse. So those flows, those releases will change. You know, if we remember here a couple weeks ago, we were running up about 12,900. That was max discharge with our 5 turbines that we have in place right now that are operational. Right now, again, we're down around 10. We will increase and decrease that to make sure that we're operating that plant as best we can. So one of the things we want to do today is talk a little bit about the activities we've had going on here for a number of weeks. And we've hit a couple milestones, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We have some graphics to show you, but as I've stated earlier, whenever we have an emergency, you need to plan for and execute your recovery plan right away. And so part of that was developing our recovery team. Various team members have come together, they've visited the site a number of times, and some of them are here today. And we have more trailers on site as we, again, have a higher level of recovery presence here at the Incident Command Post here in Orville. And that will continue to expand as we get ready to go into full-on construction. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment and invite Jeannie Cuddle up, our Department Civil Engineer, Chief Engineer. So as we work through this, we have let our contract to 4 pre-qualified bidders. So the contract is now on the street. The design is not final. The final design is not approved, but what we did is we set out a contract for bid that basically is kind of a little less than a 60% design. The idea here is we've got to move really fast. We're doing that in concert with our 2 regulatory agencies, being the Division of Safety of Dams and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They also rely on the Board of Consultants to advise them on our plans. And so they're all integrated in, working together in Sacramento. I understand some of those have been on site. Obviously, FERC and DSOD have been in from the beginning, from the first day this happened. They've been engaged in this. Now they're working very closely with Jeannie and her design and construction crew. So as we move through and refine this design, then we're all in agreement and we're moving as fast as we can. And a number of briefings we've done in Sacramento. The reason we need to do this is we need to get these approvals all the way up through our regulatory agencies, get in the input from these different organizations, these third parties, and we need this in a matter of hours or days instead of weeks and months. This is the kind of project that would take 2 or 3 years to design and 2 or 3 years to build. So we're going to do this in about 9 months. And you're going to be along for the ride. One of the things we're doing is working closely with you. We're going to have more and more community meetings, and we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. But the key here is we're working together, we're working very fast. We have regulators in the room. That's an important part of this process and will help us define the ultimate design that gets approved by them, and we finally execute that, right? So again, we've let the contract out. The contractors have done a pre-walk on the site. The bids are due on April 12th. Okay, again, it's pretty fast. Then we hope to be able to execute a contract. Our target is April 17th. Okay, so again, we're moving pretty fast. One of the things that we're doing right now is we continue to do our emergency response work, which entails making sure We're doing everything we can to protect the spillway that's there. A lot of that work's been already done, but we're monitoring that. Those are that sealing the cracks, the rock bolting that we've already done, pulling back the slopes so that if we have to spill again at a higher rate, that we minimize that erosion down below and we continue to remove the dredge material from the diversion pool. The work on the emergency spillway has been completed now for the emergency response side. Then again, we'll continue to maintain our waterproofing at the Hyatt Powerhouse to the extent that for some reason we would have high level of backwater on that powerhouse, then all those protective measures are still in place, and we'll use those if we do have that backwater. So with that being said, now we're going to move into the kind of describing the recovery process. I'm going to invite Jeannie up to give you a little bit of an overview of that process. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about our community outreach, but also a couple of major actions by the President and the Governor that have recently happened, so that kind of help us through this difficult period. Jeannie?
Let me see if I can. Do we have any? Test. Hold it or.
Can everyone hear me okay? Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeannie Cuddle, and I'm working very actively on the Oroville recovery with an amazing team of people who have been cobbled together with a pretty unwielding task. But you'd be amazed at all the hard work that everyone's putting forth to live up to our commitment, which is achieving the objective of recovering to get the systems in place by November 1st so that we can address whatever Mother Nature throws at us next year, given what we've already endured this year. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the recovery plan and some of the objectives that we have. Initially, the plan is to repair and recover and replace the damaged structures, and they'll need to be done in multiple phases just because of the very tight time constraints. We're going to look at restoring the gated spillway in a capacity that's almost twice the historical outflow in order to help prevent the use of the emergency spillway. So we're talking about the upper gated flood control outlet or the upper gated spillway. The proposed design objective we have will allow approximately 270,000 cubic feet per second to go through the gated control structure, which is well above the historical average maximum flow of 160,000 CFS. Because there's always uncertainty in the spring weather and the construction schedules can't be confidently determined due to that weather, we're also pursuing more than one alternative. So we have some ability to make modifications throughout the construction schedule. These approaches are complementary in nature so that Lake Oroville can be safely managed next winter, no matter what the weather brings. If there's some sort of delay, the contingency designs will meet the objective of passing the 270,000 CFS as well. But further work would have to be done in a future season. The emergency spillway recovery design alternatives will allow construction to work beyond November 1st. So I'm going to address each of the sections a little bit more specifically. The current plan is for the upper spillway chute, which is highlighted in yellow on the diagram to my right, is to remove and replace all necessary portions of the upper intact part of the gated flood control gated spillway. This will include replacing drains, slabs, and walls, and could require removal of minimal to moderate amounts of the foundation rock to make sure that we get an adequate foundation. The design will be completed to meet modern standards and be approved by the regulatory agencies that Bill referred to earlier. And as he mentioned, they are integrated with us as far as being involved to have very quick turnaround times on review processes. The contingency schedule plan is to replace as much of that spillway slab as possible in one season and to provide additional repairs and protective measures to any remaining slabs and spillway walls. Those protective measures could include additional rock anchors or bolts to increase that spillway reliability to meet that 270,000 CFS goal. So let me talk now about the lower chute area. So we're talking beneath where the water flows down. Oops. So the damaged spillway structure downstream of the severely eroded area will be demolished and replaced, including reinforcement of the adjacent slopes. Some of that work has already started, and we're cutting back those slopes to be safe for construction personnel now. The current plan has chosen to return the lower part of the gated flood control spillway to the geometry that it existed before the event on February 7th. This would involve replacing concrete and roller compacted concrete in areas where severe erosion has occurred to allow construction of a reinforced concrete spillway stronger than it was before the incident and designed to meet those same modern design standards. RCC, roller compacted concrete, is commonly used in dam construction and can be placed much more quickly than normal conventional concrete. It is a drier concrete mix and is placed using large compacting equipment. In many cases, in parts of California, entire dams are constructed out of RCC, so it's a robust medium. The contingency plan will be to buttress the end of the damaged upper spillway chute with roller compacted and reinforce the plunge pool and eroded area. The areas that will be deemed safe for continued use through next winter will be reinforced, and a more robust permanent features can be built at a later time. If this option is pursued, final construction on the remaining unfinished portions would be completed probably in summer 2018. So it would be in two construction seasons. So that middle picture kind of shows the two areas of green that would be filled with the roller compacted concrete that would help fill the large eroded sections. So now I'll talk about the third graphic to my right, which is the emergency spillway. The emergency spillway, as Bill mentioned, the immediate response efforts have been essentially completed. Our efforts are to make sure we can pass all of that flow next year. Our intent is not to have to use the emergency spillway ever again. However, we know that Mother Nature throws a lot at us, so we're going to be ready. The work that has been completed was considered temporary and will likely be removed and replaced. So the options that we're looking for right now, the first is to put in a large concrete wall beneath the ground and into deep rock downstream of the existing weir. This type of construction we usually deem as a cutoff wall, and it's intended to help mitigate any headward erosion that might undermine the main structure. Then we would place RCC, again the roller compacted concrete, against the existing weir. And this is common in, as I mentioned before, dams and other spillway sections. And it would be a buttress to ensure that the existing monoliths don't move and that the integrity is reinstated. And then lastly, we would place an RCC kind of blanket downstream to help convey those flows and to minimize any further erosion. The construction schedule has been developed to ensure that the concrete cutoff wall and the most critical components of the emergency spillway will be completed by November 1st. So construction of the remaining components will start this summer. As Bill mentioned, we're already well on our way of having a contract let and should have a notice to begin work to a contractor by April 17th. So the schedule, we've already mentioned previously, put out our first contract that was some no regrets work that was to do some access roads and slope setbacks. And that was awarded a few weeks ago, and that work is already fast underway. That includes the development of our construction staging areas, stabilization of those slopes, and doing some actual modeling of the spillways. Now, the Bill mentioned that the 4 contractors have had the bid package since last Friday. There's an addendum going out, and then we'll have bid opening on April 12th. Because these designs are sensitive, the contents of those bid documents have been considered critical electrical and energy and electrical infrastructure, or CEII, and so they're not made public. Again, these are details on the design that we're looking forward to moving and implementing. So I mentioned before, there's a lot of parts of our team and a lot of oversight on the groups that we're working with. So in any dam project in the state of California, we have jurisdiction with Division of Safety of Dams, and they are right with us shoulder to shoulder and reviewing and participating in the design. They also participate during construction and inspection as well as an independent oversight. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, because this is a FERC jurisdictional structure, is also involved and must approve and oversee all design. Now, one of the FERC requirements is to instigate a board of consultants, and that board of consultants consists of, I believe, 4 members who are reviewing and commenting almost on a weekly basis on different aspects of the design. So in addition to those 3, we also have partners with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the consulting community to make sure we have the brightest and best people working on this project. Now I'm going to speak about the forensic team, which is another team that is a requirement of FERC or FERC to look at what initially happened. This is different than the board of consultants. The forensic team is engaged as an independent team, and we compiled the members of the forensics team with help from USSD and ASDSO. That's the U.S. Society of Dams and the Association of State Dam Safety Officials. So those are both nonprofit dam safety national and international organizations. So we asked them to help determine that team. Once that forensic team kicks off, and they're planning a site visit next week, they will be presenting their findings to the unified team for review. And we're asking them to expedite their review so that their findings can be incorporated into the final design of what we're building. So with that, Bill was going to talk about the community outreach. I want this.
Okay, thank you. Paperwork. Thank you, Jeannie. As I said earlier, I want to highlight, we've all been through a lot. We're going to go through a lot more. I think this is important because we're all going to go through this together. And one of the things that we want to make sure is we do this in a way that works for all of you. So the Sheriff, and thank you, Sheriff, for the community meetings on the emergency evacuation planning, a huge effort to, again, reduce risk, educate people on being prepared, and with regard to flood risk, but really a process that helps us planning for any type of emergency. And so what we want to do is kind of follow along the same kind of approach that the Sheriff and this community has done along those lines, take advantage of that learning curve, and also take advantage of some of our past work with community engagement and working with the local elected officials, with our state and federal reps, as well as the public through the FERC relicensing process. But I want to make sure we get on with the community engagement part, right? So we are developing a very robust communication strategy. We're going to need some input from you on that strategy, but because, as Jeannie said, we're moving pretty fast, we want to reach out and get that dialogue started right away. So our expectations are we're going to set up a number of meetings, and our web pages are being updated as we speak today. But I want to make sure that I'm asking you and inviting you to participate on how we can best do that. Again, just here in the last almost 24 hours, we were able to secure a location for our first community meeting. It definitely won't be the last. It won't be the only place we go. And that's kind of what we want to hear from all of you. But I want to announce that our first community outreach meeting is scheduled for April 27th, Thursday, in the Butte County Fairgrounds from 6 to 8 in the Butte Building in Gridley. And I understand that wasn't able to participate in that meeting, but I understand that was well attended and a good location to have those kinds of meetings. So we have a number of meetings that the sheriff and his team set up, but we're also, again, we're looking to make sure that we're able to set up opportunities for those interested public and stakeholders to participate in that process. That's important that we actually hear from you if you're getting your questions answered or your concerns addressed. Is very important. So my goal is this is actually an environment that's two-way. Again, that's why I'm asking for your help on how to set up that communication that works best for this community. We're bringing in some additional resources to help bolster up our capacity to make sure that we're doing all those things in a way that's effective. The last thing we want to do, frankly, is go to another meeting. Right? We're all going to lots of meetings, but we want to make sure the engagement is appropriate for really all of the community, not just those that say that have the ability to travel to a community meeting or get on the web. So pushing information out through different forums will be important for us to do that. And so again, I think we've pushed out some information to our leaders in the communities at all levels of government to pretty much, again, throw that flare up that we want that kind of input and a person to connect, and we'll make sure that that's made available to you. Our website is being updated as we speak with some of the documents and resources that we've talked about through Jeannie today. So for those who are interested, we have some copies there at the door as we go out. And again, the idea here is to start sharing information, make sure you get your questions and concerns addressed. I also want to, as I said, there's a couple other things that have happened here recently that provide us a strong support to execute this project in a timely manner. First, what happened is the California, because of the extreme weather conditions we've had, the California asked for a presidential declaration so that we can get emergency resources flowing into California to support not just Butte County and the Oroville spillway, but really Butte County and I understand 48 other counties that were impacted by the extreme weather we've had this past couple months. So that was, I understand, signed and executed, and so that's a huge opportunity for all of us to work as agencies, reaching back, working through our Cal OES and our local emergency managers and looking at securing resources to help repair some of the impacts that have resulted from this wet weather. That includes the spillway, it includes roads, levees, businesses and things like that throughout California. That's a very important process for us. Again, that's that federal to state relationship that, again, in the end, supports resources coming into California, into the local region to help recover from this extreme weather conditions that we have. The other thing that happened is today, just actually about an hour ago or so, the governor issued a second executive order that assists the department and our partner agencies in responding to this incident, both on the recovery or emergency response side, but also on the recovery side. That's important. It does a couple things. You know, it waives some statutes and some concerns. An example would be like CEQA, but I want to make sure that you all understand that we are still taking, just because things have been waived, that allows us to move very fast through, say, things we would normally take weeks or months to get permits. We're still doing everything we need to comply with if there was a permit there or an action that was required by a regulatory agency. An important aspect of that is our environmental focus, our cultural resources, and tribal. So we have our liaisons, our teams are built, we're engaging, working with our partner agencies to make sure that those things that we would normally be required to do on a project like this, we're doing. And so again, if there's a concern out there that we're not aware of, then we need to make sure that flows into our liaisons so that we can make sure that those issues are addressed, not just today as we're in kind of response mode, but as we transition more fully to our recovery mode, we want to make sure those connections and communications are occurring so we can hopefully address problems before they become more serious. I also want to respond to a couple of comments, I guess, that are out there, especially as it relates to making decisions on the date where we had taken water over the emergency spillway. So those decisions were not based on environmental concerns downstream. Those decisions that were made by not only of our technical staff with consultation with DSOD and our FERC partners that were in the room, and ultimately our communication coordination with the sheriff on making decisions on if an evacuation had to be made, what mitigation actions we could take, and ultimately we couldn't do what was needed, and an evacuation was called to make sure we protect public safety. And so I want to make sure, from my point of view, I wanted to make sure that we had a spillway and our levee system still in place, even though we took water over the emergency spillway. Some of the decisions, I believe, that were being requested ultimately of me would have compromised that flood control spillway and potentially overflow levees downstream, and that didn't happen. Now, a lot of people had to move out of the way just to be sure that no lives were lost and property was damaged. And so I just want to make sure that, to the extent that's part of the conversation out there, in my point of view, again, with the consultation with a lot of really bright people, the decision was made to protect the public and the infrastructure that was still in place. So I also want to recognize, and we do have a couple of our key partners here. In just a minute, I'll have the sheriff maybe come up and make a few comments, but I want to recognize California Department of Fish and Wildlife, a key partner, fish rescues, the amazing work that was done at the hatchery, which saved millions of fish, rare and endangered fish. And so I think we've talked a little bit about that in the past, but we have people here that can talk a little bit about that. We're working very closely with our parks, which is our partner next door and our partner on the lake and within this community, and we'll be working very closely with them and other community members as we work through the concerns with regard to recreation. There's been a lot of good conversation here in the past number of weeks, and we'll continue to bring people together, have those conversations, and better understand what things we can do as a group, again, under our unified command, to see what things we can do to mitigate some of the impacts on recreation, but also be very clear on those things that are safe to do. From my perspective, this is an emergency recovery action, and we have to be focused on public safety as number one, right? So what that means is we're going to make sure that we protect not just the public, but our emergency responders in the reconstruction of this spillway. And that means some of the access to certain areas may be impaired, but that's part of our conversation that we want to have with you in the following days and weeks, is what are those things, what are those risks? In the end, how can we make sure that we protect the public, and how do we make sure that we protect our emergency responders or our recovery teams? You know, and that includes our contractors and all the different resources that are moving around. That includes our state and local and federal resources that are coming in to assist us with that. Now, Sheriff, do you want to say anything? Yep, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, my name is Corey Honey. I'm the Sheriff of Butte County. I think the fact that Bill went first today is a good sign. It's a good sign because it demonstrates that we're moving from a emergency crisis management mode into a recovery mode, and that's positive. I want it to be clear that, as I have said from the very beginning, my office is in this for the duration, and we will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Department of Water Resources as well as the other agencies who have come here to work on this situation and ultimately move us towards final resolution and recovery. And as part of that, we will continue to monitor the situation and the potential risks that could result from changing weather and from increased flows into the reservoir. But we are in a much, much better position today than we were back on February 12th. I'm very happy about that. So along with monitoring the risks and ensuring public safety, we're also going to be watching the recovery piece. Director Croyle has been very good about sharing with me these plans. I had a briefing on, actually a pre-briefing last week where I learned some of this information, and then yesterday learned more about what the plan is today. As we go forward, I'm going to pay close attention to the information that comes from the Board of Consultants as well as from the forensic team, and make sure that I understand it and can assure my community that things are proceeding appropriately and that our interests are being protected and that we are safe, because that's my #1 priority. I'm also very pleased that DWR and Acting Director Croyle are moving forward with community outreach, picking up where we left off with our community meetings to let the community know about our evacuation plan. I intend to support Director Croyle with those meetings by either being at those meetings myself, or if I'm not available, and unfortunately I'm not available for the first one, but I will have staff there so that we can be present to answer any questions that the public might have with regard to public safety or evacuation issues. But along that way, we want to help DWR get the word out to the members of our community, because we understand how important it is for the members of our community to understand what's going on, to be comfortable with what's going on, and we're here to help with that balance between transparency and also security. And as you have heard, there are certain security issues associated with the design of these structures that if they were made public and fell in the wrong hands, they could be used to create havoc or harm. But we want to make sure that there's an appropriate balance, and we're watching that and are able to navigate through that process. I, as the sheriff, public safety and security is important to me, and so I don't want anything out there that might cause a problem for us down the road, but I also want to make sure that our community is aware of what's going on and they're comfortable with that. And with that, I will turn it back over to Director Croyle for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. So I want to make sure we provide some time for questions and answers, but before I do, I kind of feel like there's always somebody I forget, and I apologize. So again, Caltrans and CAL FIRE, which have been absolutely fantastic partners through all this, as well as Parks and Department of Fish and Wildlife, and you know, those that are also not here, like our FERT, I don't know if we have anybody from DSOD here today in the tent, but I want to reach out and recognize, I know a couple times I missed Caltrans sitting right in front of me, and I apologize for that, because you know, roads are huge. I know there's a technical or kind of a strike team working on roads, and we'll continue to have that dialogue. You know, again, it's been a really wet year. It's not over yet, but to the extent that there's been impacts as a part of the department responding to this incident, then you know, we're going to work closely with the local government, the city, the county, and others with the strong support of Caltrans to work through those kinds of issues. So I think we're up for some questions.
Could you explain a little bit better just how much work is going to be done this year, and then how much is sort of left over for the next year? Could you give it 80% on? I mean, what is your sense of that?
Yeah, let's talk about that, and then I got wonderful people here to make sure I get it right. Some are also in the back. And so the goal here, and I want to just take 5 seconds to remind people We have concept designs. Those concept designs have moved through our regulatory agencies and the BOC. So that's what I'm talking about. And to highlight that again, we are out just drilling on the spillway itself up in this area, primarily in the lower area. And so we have a concept going in that's been vetted and concurred with. So, but it's a concept design, and we need more information, such as the geotechnical information. This last week or so, we got a whole bunch more geotechnical information. As an example of some of the information that's playing back into our reevaluation and part of our communication with our regulatory partners and the Board of Consultants is there's a whole bunch more concrete on this hill than what was put on the specs. Some of our core holes are going down 4 and 5 feet through concrete before you get to the rock. I mean, which is good, right? So it's a more robust structure than we thought it might be or what was on the plans. So what that has done is get us to rethink, A, what is the ultimate design? And B, how fast or where we should start work to minimize the risk of impact or our ability to not have a spillway completed for the next year. But to speak to your question, which is kind of like, what's the lay of what are we shooting for by November 1st is kind of what I'm hearing you ask for. So as Jeannie said, our goal is to have the upper chute, this is that area. The concept is to have the capacity to pass its current design flow of 270,000 CFS. So that's the deck and the walls in a condition that we can put that design capacity down through the upper chute, right? So how much of that we get done depends on how fast we can construct our access, how much material that we do or don't have to remove is going to play into how much of that upper chute we get done. So the lower chute is, we'll start with filling our plunge pools, as Jeannie indicated, with that RCC, or that roll compacted concrete. We're going to fill up those plunge pools and build a chute that takes 100,000 CFS down that lower chute. Now that's lower than the upper chute, which is 270. So the next year we would come back and build up the rest of that chute to take on this design capacity of 270,000. So what that also means is, well, Mr. Croyle, that means you're going to be limited to 100,000 CFS down that chute. And that'll be part of how we operate the reservoir going into the wet season. But as a contingency, because as Jeannie indicated, we've been able to take 150, 160,000 CFS down this spillway, which is within the levees downstream, is that one of the contingency plans, if we had to, next winter, move 150,000 CFS out of this chute, then we would take advantage of the eroded channel. So part of the concept on this design, a contingency, was to prepare to take water over the side of that engineered structure down into that eroded channel, again, so that we can pass that water and protect the dam in this community. So that's one of those contingency plans that we've added to that. And that's in part why we're pulling some of the slopes back, and part of the design of the contingency plan when it gets more final is how we set up that channel if we had to push more than 100,000 down that lower chute.
So that ravine, well, is going to remain over the winter,
right,
by design, in case you need to push 150,000.
Exactly right. So again, the design team is, everyone's throwing a lot at them, and so the idea is have, like we have during response, is be ready for Mother Nature to throw us another curve. You know, part of it is how much can you get done. So there's a lot of concern now. People are saying we can't get this done. The approach here is standard spillway and dam construction techniques. This roller compacted concrete, it's stronger, it doesn't have a slump, it's able to be placed much quicker, and which allows us to be able to move pretty fast on this as soon as we get the site prepped to be able to pour that RCC and then construct those channels. So this is not new construction techniques. This is standard stuff that has been used very recently here in California and across the nation. So the idea here is to use that standard construction application of this approach and materials, and we believe, based on the consultation with our our various regulatory people, our BOC, and our contractors, more importantly, that they can get this thing done. So,
Why are you replacing the upper chute at all if it's undamaged?
well, that's part of the risk assessment that we've done. Well, that was based on the information we have and the performance of this lower area without having the benefit of the forensic team, etc. And so, but we have new information just, again, with this past week. And so they're reevaluating, our approach here. So we're doing that on the fly during our design, is to find out if we actually do or don't have to replace all or part of that chute. That's information that we're collecting now. It gets back to just how robust is the chute that's there. So we have the historical construction documents, and now we have current geotech information that we're collecting now. We haven't collected it all, and so we're collecting some more as we speak, but then we'll collect some more in the future. Another question?
The other two anticipated almost 270,000 CFS. Obviously, the levees can't withstand that. So what work will be done for the levees downstream? Has that been discussed, and will any of that work happen this year by next winter?
Okay, that's a good question. So the design of that capacity of that flood control spillway is for an extreme flood event. And so the design of the levee systems down below are for 150, 160. There's lots of discussion what that is. But the design of this chute is over what the levees can hold downstream by design. The idea here is the flood control structure and the emergency spillway are designed to take an extreme flood event that equals to 750,000 CFS. So between the two structures, that's the design that the regulators made us build this dam to. The idea behind that is if Mother Nature floods the valley, which is what's going to happen in that kind of a flood event, that in the end, the valley won't look so good, but the dam will be in place so that you can recover from that kind of an event, that extreme event. So the spillway is designed to take a lot more than the levees hand, but the idea there is to protect the dam if you're going to have one of these extreme events.
So there isn't any plan to reinforce or work on the levees?
Not as part of this project. That's a completely different flood control issue. Good question, though.
So is it accurate that by the time all is said and done, both the emergency spillway and the regular spillway will be completely reconstructed? And if so, do you have any idea what kind of price tag you're looking at for all of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't have a refined price on both the what I call the interim emergency spillway as well as the spillway itself. We're going to find out fairly soon, hopefully by the 17th, and the concept of what that general number is. We don't have a good number to use right now. I think back in February, very early in this conversation, we talked about $100 to $200 million, but we also have a whole bunch of new information since then, so I can't really give you a cost. Again, we'll know very soon, and we'll talk about that in our meetings as we come up. And then what's those kinds of costs based on?
Is there a benchmark that you have to hit as far as the work on the upper chute before water starts coming in order for that water to not damage the upper chute? In other words, if it rains before November 1st or construction goes a little slower than anticipated, it's more water end up causing more problems for the units.
Yeah, I don't think there's a benchmark. I think some of the protective measures that we've put in place right now so that we could use the upper chute, especially those lower areas where we've rock bolted in. I think Jeannie talked about anchoring, and there's some other things that we would do that doesn't take that long to do. And so if we got caught behind schedule for some reason, then we would go ahead and implement those protective measures to protect the structure that's still there. I think we're coming out, we're going to be reevaluating the whole upper chute because, again, this geotechnical data has provided a whole bunch more information, which is important for us to feed into the design that gets reviewed and approved and vetted through the process. And that's why it's important for all of us to be talking about this together, again, as we all go for the ride along this recovery process. So we're going to learn a lot. Another question here in the brown?
There's a question that I hear circulating in the community often is that given that the power plant was broken, the pipes under the dam were broken, the auxiliary spillway was known that it was going to fail if it was used, and the regular spillway is built to standards that aren't up to par. Given all four of those things, why was the dam allowed to rise that high?
Okay, I don't agree with your comment.
Okay.
And so I think the dam was built to the current standards back in 1968. I don't think any of us would go back to our design criteria in 1968 and build a new dam that way, right? And so we've all learned a lot since 1960s on how we build dams, the materials that we use, and et cetera.
Okay, so the power plant is...
But so why are you saying the power plant is broken? I'm not aware of that.
It certainly was until you got it up and running again.
The power plant couldn't be operated because of the erosion, the debris pile pushed water back up against the plant. The plant wasn't.
What's wrong with it?
There's just water up against the till. It's unsafe for us to use that power plant with water up against the back of that powerhouse at a certain elevation. Okay, so the idea there was you cannot operate the power plant with that backwater, and the debris had to be removed so that it can operate like it does now. There's no change in the power plant. The power plant is just fine. And we're going to stay on top of maintaining it, just like you would your car, to make sure that it's running efficiently and effectively.
So, Bill, if I'm looking at that chart on the far left and your far right probably, are you lining the entire emergency spillway?
Well, the distance down the hill where we put in that cutoff wall is yet to be determined. And so they're going to go out here in the coming weeks and they're going to drill a bunch of those geotech holes like we did in the spillway. And they're going to determine how far down the slope and how deep you go to where you have that blue metamorphic hard rock. And they'll set that location for that cutoff wall, and then they'll put the splash pad in from the cutoff wall back up to the buttress, right, Jeannie? Right.
So it's at least a partially lined, it'll be at least a partially lined spillway when all is said.
Yeah, over the top of the spillway, onto the buttress, onto the splash pad, and then some distance downslope where you put that cutoff wall in.
Mr. Ford, question, please. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Someone else? Yeah. Sir?
Yeah, I've been waiting to ask a question. Steve, you've used the term Mother Nature several times. Why not climate change? This is nothing that I represent, say, Warville Trees with Youth Environmental Council. We all know about climate change. And so you know there's going to be extreme weather events. Mother Nature has nothing to do with it. That's a myth. We know there's going to be extreme weather events. And so I want to know that emergency spillway, is that going to be functional? And then also, what's the status of the suit that the county has claiming EWR knew about climate change and failed to prepare for it? So those are the...
Okay, so I'm not familiar with the terms of the suit, and so I'm sorry I can't answer that question, and we can look into that. Climate change is part of our world now. So that's part of how the reservoir operators working with our regulatory agencies deal with things like drought. We've just gone through one heck of a drought, and how that affects reservoir operations and water supply, environmental protection, recreation, all of that, as well as now we're on the other side. Just within 2 years, we're at the other end of the extreme. So climate change plays into how we operate and plan to operate all reservoirs in California. That's why we work with our key regulatory partner being the Army Corps of Engineers. They're the ones that set the flood control curves on this. Getting back to the emergency spillway, nobody wants to use that again. What we're doing now is an interim measure so that we can take a little bit longer to go back and see what is that emergency spillway, what should that look like. And then also I think important part of like these community meetings is talking about what that actually means. When you talk about, say, 500,000 cubic feet per second coming down the Feather River because of a climate change extreme weather event, what does that actually mean to the city of Oroville, the Sacramento Valley, all the way down to the Delta? Because I think that's part of the conversation as it relates to climate change. And then what should we do to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce our risks? How we might operate this reservoir might be a little different. How we build an emergency flood control channel might be different. And part of that is setting expectations. If we have to use that, there's going to be mud, debris, and erosion up to the point where you have a cutoff wall, and that's what's going to save the dam. So the dam won't fail, but that doesn't mean there still won't be flooding if you have this catastrophic event. And that's part of the dialogue and the communication that I think, going back to the sheriff's improving the mass evacuation plans, that's a conversation that he's been through, and it will continue to work with the community on, just like we will with reservoir operations. So one more question and we're good.
The RVOS system, can we expect to see that in operation by next November, do you think?
Yes, actually we should have all the control systems put in, I understand, the first week in May. And so the idea is to be able to use that sometime in May or June if needed.
And is the RVOS system capable of operating under high head pressures like 860 feet elevation in conjunction with the high power plant? Could we get another fire?
I don't know the nuances of that. It's a good question. And we do have people here that can answer that. I just can't answer that question. What's that? The what spillway? Oh, the flood control spillway, yes. Yep. We do. Now, the issue is one or two more times. We were just having a meeting just before this press conference of what our forecasting looks like, out 10 days, a little bit longer, what we expect for snowpack runoff. Part of the challenge is the weather systems coming in. And so that's part of our discussion. I think we've talked a little bit about what is the safe discharge from the reservoir through the spillway. Is it 50,000, 40,000, something lower? That's part of the conversation where we end up here on whether we do one or two spills through the rest of the year. I think the key is for us is we want to be able to get and start construction as soon as we can. So really how you manage reservoir operations, inflow and outflow, the operation of the Hyatt Powerhouse will help us determine whether that's one or two more spills. One more. So the question again is? Okay, that's a good question. So part of the reservoir operations plan is still being vetted. Part of that is the dialogue with the regulatory agencies from a safety risk standpoint. We want to factor in water supply, the recreation, environmental, all those things are as part of that developing that operations plan. It's probably going to be 2 or 3, maybe 4 more weeks before, because a lot of that has to do also with how the snow runs off and how we manage the reservoir with regard to the spill events and how, where we end up at the end of those spill events. Got one more question? Yeah. So as the sheriff indicated, we're going to work closely with the sheriff, and so they won't be made public. The first one shouldn't have been made public. Those are part of the CEII, so it's critical energy and information. And so the challenge is making sure those reports are generated, they're passed to FERC, they're made available to us so that we can understand what those impacts are. But what we've done, we've met with the sheriff, and because of the security issues, which is the foundation concern with the BOC reports, we're going to work directly with the sheriff so he can put eyes on it, and we can talk about what those findings, and then as appropriate, he can share that with the public. So the idea here is to maintain a level of security that's appropriate, at the same time provide the public and the interested parties the findings of those reports. I think, and I appreciate the sheriff's support along that's not something he has to do, but I think it does help with the communication with those that are interested in what these things say. But to be clear, the sheriff and I have been out on the spillway, and we want to make sure that security is important. And access it and mountain bike around it, that's all important, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the way we rebuild this thing, and it's protected. And so there is going to be a level of security over certain types of information. And again, we'll work closely with the sheriff to work through that process. Okay? Thank you very much.